To preview this week's matchup between #1 Alabama and the Kentucky Wildcats, I'm joined by former Alabama offensive lineman and current ESPN analyst Barrett Jones. Barrett, it's great to see you. Thanks for joining us.
What's up, Chris? How are we doing? Thanks for having me on, man. Looking forward to getting a chance to call a game this weekend.
Yes, sir. Man, doing well, and I appreciate you coming on. It should be a good one. This has been a pretty one-sided series with Alabama holding a 37-2 with one tie advantage over Kentucky all time. But however, this isn't the same Wildcats team as in past years. Mark Stoops has really improved the program there in Lexington. Now, as you said, you're going to be calling the game for ESPN Radio this Saturday. What are your overall thoughts on the Wildcats?
Well, first of all, Chris, you have a whole different mentality as a broadcaster, and so. I guess I'm probably secretly rooting for Alabama, but my #1 rooting is for a good game just because it's more fun to call a game. I'm not so sure after watching the tape. I do think that Kentucky's gotten better. I think their defense continues to improve, and they actually have a pretty decent unit over there. But after watching the tape, I don't think it's any secret that they're pretty overmatched. And I do think that some of their defensive statistics might be a little bit more of a product of who they've played so far. Still have Alabama and Florida left on the schedule, both two high-powered passing offenses. And look, the reality of college football in 2020, and if you're an old-school football fan, you might not like it, but even Nick Saban has embraced the fact that if you don't have a high-powered passing offense, you're probably not going to be elite. And as a lineman, it almost hurts me to say that, but those are the facts of life. And Terry Wilson, he's a good, solid player, but it's just not a very high-powered, explosive offense. So I think they might struggle a little bit on Saturday because of that.
Well, since the second half against Georgia, the Alabama defense has only given up 17 points in 10 quarters of play. If my math is correct, and it's a lot better than my English, I promise you, Barrett, the Crimson Tide defense is allowing just 1.7 points per quarter over that span. What do you think has changed, and how do you see them matching up against that Kentucky offense that's averaging just 23 points per game? And as you mentioned, with Terry Wilson, he's back. He was back last week against Vanderbilt.
Yeah, for me, I think it really all started after the Ole Miss game, just a half before that. I think, obviously, they got embarrassed. I called that game as well, and just the tempo, they were totally out of sorts. Guys were, not lined up. The communication was terrible. And since then, it seems like there's been a real refocus for those guys. Look, some of it, too, is some of the teams they played, it's helped them get locked in. Again, Georgia, as we've seen, is not a very explosive offense, and they were a little maybe more explosive then. They've gotten less explosive because of some of the guys they've lost. So that's part of it. I don't think all the problems, just are magically gone, but I do think that some of those younger guys that have been playing some key roles are continuing to get a little bit older, continuing to mature. I think the secondary has continued to get better.
On defense, the Wildcats have shown glimpses of being pretty good. They held Mississippi State to 2 points, Tennessee to just 7, Georgia to 14, but they have had some injuries up front on the defensive line, and we know Matt Jones is going to throw the ball a lot and very well. Alabama has the #1 pass offense in the SEC, but on the other side, the Wildcats have the #1 pass defense in the conference. Is this a good setup for Najee Harris and the Alabama running game to have a big day?
Well, first of all, the running game has continued to improve. I think that's one thing people need to realize and think about. Really, all across the country, running games have kind of lagged behind. And I think a big part of that was just the coronavirus, the amount of practice, the amount of contact. I mean, the way you fit up blocks to the line of scrimmage, those things just take time and repetitions to get good at and to really gel as units. And so I've seen kind of a wave all across the country of running games getting better as the season's going on. Because, again, usually you get those repetitions in fall camp and, even in spring, that a lot of these guys didn't get. So I think the running game for Alabama has improved and will continue to improve. To be honest with you, Chris, I think Alabama has the best offense in the country. And when you're as good as they are, you really honestly don't let the opponent dictate too much of what you do. You kind of just play your game. And that's a good luxury to have because a lot of people don't have that. But there's not really any defense in my mind in the entire country. And I still think Georgia, when they were healthy, is just about as good as anyone in the country on defense with some of the secondary players they have. It's really hard to match up against the kind of players that Alabama has.
Well, Barrett, thank you for joining us. I hope you have a great week and really enjoy calling the game. Hope to talk with you again soon. Roll Tide.
Thanks, Chris.
Kickoff is scheduled for 3 o'clock on Saturday on SEC Network. Reporting from the Crimson Tide Production Studio inside Bryant-Denny Stadium, I'm Christopher England with Tide TV.